I hope you can feel us, and you're definitely about to hang out with us.
Just do the things that make you feel good in life.
Is it helpful? Is it hurtful? Or is it going to make people laugh?
How would you identify yourself?
Trusting yourself enough to put trust in strangers.
It's a process, like everything else.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Human to Human. Of course, we're in quarantine, so we are going to start off Zoom-wise, but there's still a lot of gems that are going to be dropped, so get excited for this episode. I'm really excited to have Jazzella Leon here with me. We only recently connected, honestly, but it has been an incredible connection, and you are just you're smart, you're innovative, you're introspective, you get it. You're rocking that skin tone like it ain't nothing. You're rocking the Black people. I'm like, okay, there's so much here. There's just so much here. And I'm proud. I'm so excited to, just continue to like dive into your world and also allow your world to expand to all the worlds of the people who pay attention and watch Human to Human, because I feel like we are all going through so many of the same things. And I do strongly believe we're all in this together. So I know this conversation is going to be healing. But yeah, I just wanted to introduce you. He's a writer, a performer, author. Let me make sure I clarify. I'm like, let me add author, writer, but let me just say author. Let's just say that. Storyteller. Yeah, there's just so much here. So I'm excited. Is there anything I'm missing that I need to make sure that people know?
I think
a father, a husband.
Father, this is I'm just gonna carry you around with me. If I can put you in my book bag, and just introduce me to other people, Stacy, that would be amazing. You are awesome.
I'll be there. I'm like, this is how it goes.
you are equally awesome, equally dope. I'm just glad to be able to share space with you again in this way, and on your platform, which is super dope. So I'm here. I'm with it.
I really appreciate that. So I didn't tell you what the topic was going to be because, like I said, I like surprise. And I also knew that I felt like just the rawness of it would be really great. And so I really want to dive into the conversation of self-forgiveness and accountability.
Okay.
So I have asked a few of my guests this before, and so I'd love to start off by asking you this. What is the last thing you forgave yourself for the first time?
The last thing I forgave myself for the first time. I don't know if I fully forgave myself, but trying to forgive myself for my body. There's an essay I started working on because I'm a dad. I'm a dad 2 times over. I'm 37. Age and gravity are slowly starting to chip away at any sort of physical prowess that I might have once had. And I got a dad body, it is what it is. Brother ain't been hitting the weights in a while. So things are getting a little sloppy, gotta be honest.
The realness, yes.
But I think, and it's something I was having a conversation with my partner about, because patriarchy is very interesting in that way. Dads having beer bellies or guts, whatever you want to call them. It's almost considered cute. It's funny. Sitcoms the heavier dad is considered the comical one. But if a woman was to post a photo of herself, exposing skin or exposing layers of herself that maybe she's just now become comfortable with, especially when we talk about the body positive movement. The comments are relentless. And it's normally from punk, foolish ass men who have some day. But it's what I'm understanding, what I'm trying to wrap my brain around too, is this is my body, this is where it is now. And giving myself the space to feel that. And to recognize that. And that's a whole nother conversation about aging too, and how much weight we put on our physical appearance, or at least I know I used to, and that really does go away. It disappears. And so trying to be forgiving to myself and for myself, where my body is now, and where it might not be. That might change. I might pick up a dumbbell tomorrow, probably not, but probably not. Probably gonna pick up a Popeye sandwich first. I'm just going, you know, I know where my taste buds lie, you know. But yeah, I think that's actually a really good question. But that's probably, I think, this has been the first time that I've at least been trying to be forgiving about that in that regard.
Wow, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And you rarely hear the guy side of it. And I've always been really interested in like, how do guys deal with this? You know what I'm saying? Because obviously women have been objectified in a very specific way. And there's a lot of comments and things towards that. But men have also dealt with that. And you never know what the guys who are reading GQ, the magazine, the whatever, are feeling because we don't talk about it often.
Like listen, I didn't skip a couple of shirt sizes, and like, you know, I wear large shirts, sometimes XLs, because I want to hide my belly. Like, it's not, you know, it's one of those things where I've seen my body change over the years, from like when I was 25 to like when I was 30, even when I was 34. Like it's been a difference. And so I think for me, and we've talked about this, in leaning into the truth of things, what I would like to be able to do is continue to be as vulnerable as possible to kind of create dialogue for men. Because again, I think those are also parts of the things that creep in to how we fetishize women's bodies, and also like misogyny and patriarchy. If we're not dealing with the insipid things, the dark things, the hard things, it shows up in other places, you know?
Absolutely. And even in this topic, it unveils the things that are also attached to self-forgiveness, which is shame, you know, guilt, and trying to figure out how many steps you have to take before we get to, I forgive myself, I am fine, I am enough, you know. And I always, even with your point, and I'm so appreciative that was a story you shared, but do you feel like it's possible to experience self-forgiveness without guilt, without shame? Can we like hurry up and get there, or are those next steps necessary?
I think that's such an important question, and a great alley-oop, because you have to, I think there has to be something that needs to be forgiven. And I think the shame, the guilt, the self-loathing, those things are kind of part of it. And it's something I think Buddhism has been really impactful in that way for me, because it's recognizing that those things generally don't go away. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I took somewhat of like a social media hiatus, and really what I've kind of shifted it to is me just being, I thought I was intentional, but not trying to just take it to the next level. And like, I was posting maybe 3 times a day on Instagram, and I could see myself like meditating, sitting with things and thoughts and trying to find the words, as opposed to really being in a place of letting the words find me, which means I might post once a day, I might not post for 3 weeks, and just giving myself the time to be with that process. But I bring all that up because, you know, you open IG, and it's like, it can easily become a shame fest. You know, you're comparing relationships, you're comparing body types, you're comparing content. And it doesn't happen all the time, like, but I recognize there was a reason. Like, even when I go on IG, I just post. And sometimes I feel bad because I want to engage with my friends' content. I want to engage with other people's content just because I want to help I want to help the algorithm in their favor. But I also know, like, if you keep scrolling, you're going to hit something. You know what I'm saying? You're going to hit that vacation picture. You're going to see something that is a reminder of something that you thought you'd gotten over, but is actually still a trigger. But that's the shame, that's the guilt, you know, and to your point of not feeling good enough. And so you need those things. And I think those things are always going to be existing. What Buddhism has been able to teach me is how much we limit the attention we give to the triggers, you know, and how long we stay in that space. The more we do the work, the less time I think it takes for us to move from the shame to a better, healthier space. But it's going to be there, and it needs to be there, because you need that balance, I think, to be able to reconcile the work that still needs to be done, the awakening that still needs to happen. You know?
I think that's so fair. And I think what's so great about what you said is the time, because for me, I don't know if I believe okay, I will say I do believe that shame and guilt, they do something. They do get you closer to that. But because sometimes we don't have the training to get out of shame faster or to get out of guilt faster, we are there so much longer than necessary and needed. That's healthy. By the time we get to self-forgiveness, it's like we piled it up. It's 60 things we need to forgive ourselves for instead of one, at a time, because you're always going to be forgiving yourself. You're always going to be evolving and growing. But what I'm trying to teach us and also teach myself is get out from here faster. You don't have to squat here. This is not your home. You are not renting anything here. You have this is not real estate. These are emotions and feelings and whatever, but they get you closer to that healthier relationship with yourself. And so I love that you just talked about the time. And so, okay, one of the tools it seems like you mentioned is being aware with how much you're spending on social. That can definitely get you out of that. Is there some other tools you have that you're like, these things make sure I know I don't live here?
Gratitude journals, and I think being very nuanced and very specific when we're talking about gratitude journals, like really granular in the process. So I brought this example up in other podcasts, so I won't bring that up, but I'll use it could be as simple as so at one point in time I had read, there was something I read about left brain, right brain, and how there are certain things you can do to kind of help create a healthier brain, right? So if you're right-handed, doing things with your left hand, stuff like that. So I just taught myself how to brush my teeth with my left hand because I was like, okay, I need to change the programming. So and sometimes it'll be something as simple as if you've been taking a certain path to get to work, take a different path. So sometimes I would just switch it up when I would get off the train. And so for my gratitude journal, it wouldn't be about the path I took, but it would be something along the lines of, I'm able to walk to work a different way today. And it feels silly, I think, to some maybe, but the smaller the victory that we can acclaim for ourselves, the easier it then becomes to be in a space of grace, I think. So I being able to write down, hey, I taught myself how to brush my teeth with my left hand, for me felt like a victory. And so it's what are the other ways? How am I showing up for people? How am I showing up for myself? I didn't eat that Popeye's chicken sandwich today. You might eat it tomorrow, but but if you can recognize those things, it allows you more room to also start recognizing the bigger things. And you start talking more in more healthy ways. Another example, and this was something I tweeted because a good friend of mine, Adria, was trying to name her plants, and I told her she should name her plant. I told her just name it Adria, and then I put out a tweet that's like, it's a life hack. You should name your plant after yourself, and people have been sharing it, and it's been making me super happy. And I think part of that is it kind of leans towards the gratitude journal. But how can we talk nice about ourselves, man? You know what I'm saying? If you're gonna pour love into a plant, right? You give it water, you give it words of affirmation. How are we able to do that for ourselves as well? If that's not naming a plant, that can just be as simple as putting sticky notes on your mirror. I am great, I am beautiful. This goes for men and women. I think for men it's very easy to look at words of affirmation and gratitude for themselves as something that feels like a feminine energetic quality as opposed to a human quality, affirming yourself. Because the more you can affirm yourself also, the easier it becomes not to just self-forgive, but also to forgive others and to show up in a space of grace and mercy and empathy for others, because we're extending that to ourselves. The more we're feeding ourselves, the better everything else becomes around us,
Amazing. And oh God, that was the perfect way to almost lead us to the next thing, but also answer a few questions before that. Because one thing I have to say is I think the affirmations mantra or advice, it's so positive, and I think we've heard it enough times where people feel like it almost doesn't even work. You know how something becomes a cliche, and you really think about, why is it a cliche? Because it works. Because we've been doing it for so long. Not everything, But there are things that are cliches because they have merit to be a cliche.
Absolutely.
So when people say affirm yourself, look yourself in the mirror, write a note, and just the beauty of you breaking that down as a human thing versus a male or female thing, I even find it as a female very it has been tough for me to like write things out, and I'm expected to write positive things about myself around and then stare at them because I thought I was being self-centered. Isn't that crazy? You being self-centered because you love yourself? Like that's what like. Yeah. So I for someone like for me overcoming that and making sure I reimagine, like, no, this is you making sure that you're a bomb and you know who you are before you even walk outside. I don't know if you've experienced that as well, but I also think because of the culture we're in and we're also breaking down the things that made American culture and make this global culture are, perfectionism and not allowing yourself to tell yourself how amazing you are. So once you get rid of that moment, affirmations feel really good. They feel great, and they're so useful, and they're a cliche for a reason.
No, you're spot on, Stacy. Spot on, per usual. I think also too, you said something like reimagining, and reimagining has become kind of the core of my work. There's a book that I finished reading, Pleasure Activism, by Adrienne Marie Brown, and really it's centered around. I don't want to say centered around Black feminist theory, but the work really is about finding pleasure and joy, not just in social justice spaces, but in ways that are going to create a more liberated body, a more liberated mind. Definitely with the Black femme audience in mind, but a beautifully written book that, for me, kind of leans into the space of reimagining. Like, what is it? How do we reimagine love for body, love for self? How do we reimagine the systems that have oppressed us? I can't remember if I brought this up on our first talk, but Freedom Dreams by Dr. Robin D.G. Kelly has also been a really inspirational book for me when we talk about reimagining things. And it's very easy, I think, for self-love and healing to feel like a practice that doesn't have space in social justice, when I honestly think you can't have liberation without them. Because what you're all we would be doing is bringing in a new oppressive system into place if we're not doing the work of deconstructing the things that already ail our community, the misogyny within the movement still, the patriarchy within the movement still, the transphobia, homophobia in the movement still, and a lot of that unfortunately comes from the space of Black men. And so if we're not doing that work, where we're abolishing police forces and we're doing all this, it doesn't matter if people in the community still don't feel safe. The trans women still don't feel safe. And a lot of that comes from going back to what you're talking about, reimagining, but then also that self-love and how we've been trained to view self-love as arrogant or selfish, when like the white community doesn't even have to really practice. That's not fair. The white community has kind of had it ingrained in them, self-love, just by what they see. Like there are those, of course, who've been greatly affected, like when we look at suicide rates and things of that sort. So I don't want to make light of that. But when you can turn on your TV and see a reflection of yourself, when you can open a magazine and see a reflection of yourself, when you can look in your community and see who's being fed and who isn't, who you go to school with, who your teachers are. Like, when you're seeing representations in your community that are positive, that are wealthy, that are healthy, that helps anchor that helps anchor you in self-love, as opposed to when you don't. And then you have to create it. Like, we've had to create those things for ourselves, willfully, So I think what you're talking about is super important. Like, being able to just reimagine. Like, if I'm thinking this, and just asking why. Like, why do I think this way? Why do I feel this way? Where did I learn this from? Who did I learn this from? And why do I think it's true? And going from there. And some of it is going to make absolute sense. And I think a lot of it isn't. And the things that don't, we have to let go of.
Why do you think we're afraid to ask why?
I mean, we're afraid to ask why, because why would then force us to do the reconstructive work of peeling back the layers and really if I've attached, and we talked about this too, like if I've attached myself to my blackness, to my whiteness, to my Christianity, to my Catholicism, to my motherhood, to my whatever, to my sex work, to whatever the thing that I'm doing or that I consider to be a role, if I have to ask questions about that role and about who I am in that role, that then, and especially if I've used that as an identifier, as my identity, once I start unpacking that, I then have to start unpacking everything else. You know, what am I if I'm not a black man? You know, like, what am I if I'm not a father? What does that mean? You know, I think I was having a very good conversation with a brilliant sister the other day about like how we've kind of been, I don't want to say zombies, but when you're not present, right? When we're not doing the job of really trying to awaken and be aware of the things within us and the things that surround us, we put ourselves in a position where we're kind of just we're walking without purpose, without intention. And so like you just kind of log on to Instagram because it's habit. You know, you keep keying your group chat because it's habit. You send, like, the things that we do. You send a text to that person you're probably not supposed to send a text to because you're not thinking, right? You're just kind of going through the motions of life as opposed to examining the why. Because then the why is going to get you to the place of, okay, what else have I not dealt with that's creating these scenarios that are putting me in very unhealthy situations, or situations that are devaluing me or making me question my self-worth and my self-value. But the why is the key to that, because then you have to do the real work. It's because it's easier to not, to kind of just coast and let.
So much easier. So much easier.
So
like just so much easier.
It's like you can just coast and you can hurt people, you can hurt yourself, and not have to examine the whys of that. And there are a lot of people who do that, who go to their deathbeds not questioning why, and it's like, if we're trying to get free, if we're trying to get liberated, then we need to ask ourselves the hard questions. I see a lot of folks in movement work who are doing movement work but aren't doing healing work, who aren't healing men and women, who are showing up for the cause but they're not asking, where can I be placing greater empathy, and where in me does the healing need to happen, so that I'm not passing any of this energy, I'm not bringing any of this energy into these spaces. Because I think sometimes what happens is folks will go into a room and go, man, this energy is weird, and now asking themselves, is it me? Like, am I the person that's like, what was I doing before? What was I engaging with before? Who was I engaging with before that created this energy that I'm in now? Like, me first. For me, the work is always me first. Why me? Like, why? And then going from there,
I also want to add that the why does the answers to the why, whether scary, painful, heartbreaking, beautiful, wonderful, centered, whether it's any of those things, it doesn't diminish the worthiness of who you are. I think that's the hardest part for me about asking the why. I think sometimes when we ask, I'm a lot more excited and open now to be asking why. I think I'm asking about everything, and it's been fun, but it's not always fun. And I think, a lot of the hesitation to start asking was, am I less worthy for everything I believe? Or am I less worthy for have been wrong, or have been right and didn't admit it, or wasn't confident to stand in it? There's so much that can be attached to that why, and which is why I asked, like, even from your perspective, why do you think people are afraid? And then for mine, I really think it is about questioning of worthiness. I feel like we find out that behind that, we might be crap. And that's possible. That's super possible.
Yeah,
it doesn't take away from your worthiness, though, and that's the deep part of it. And you said something so beautiful about, once we learn to forgive ourselves, we forgive others. And in the process you just mentioned, I think these steps all lead to accountability, right? So can we talk about that moment of self-forgiveness, but also forgiving someone first? Which, do you think one comes before the other? Do you think they happen at the same time? Because sometimes we realize the things I thought or held on to or whatever, I didn't even put them in there. So am I forgiving myself or am I forgiving someone else? And like, I'm not forgiving me because I didn't even do this to myself, right? And then that's when we miss the accountability part.
Yeah.
So there's just, it's all intertwined. What do you think?
I think it is rare for us to be void of fault in scenarios. Outside of like, you know, when we're talking about very triggering events like sexual assault and things of that sort, right? Other than those, it's really hard for me to see an instance where we don't have room for forgiveness of self as well. Because there is no forgiveness without accountability. I think even when we look at transformative justice, if we're talking about, again, abolition, you know, and, you know, there's been a very deep probing question surrounding what do you do for those who have been perpetrators of sexual assault? And, you know, I don't really have an answer for that. What I do recognize is, in order for a system to work, like even when you look at jail, you know, as horrible as it is as a system, the idea behind it is you commit a crime, you're punished for the crime, you're released from the crime because you served your time, right? And you serve your penance to the community, and now you're free, right? How it's supposed to work. And I think forgiveness is no different. It's like someone wrongs you or someone was in the wrong in a situation. In order to forgive them, they have to do something to show that they are accountable for whatever they've done, and they've taken the necessary steps in order to show that they are actually sorry for what happened, and they've actually even are showing how they're going to ensure that doesn't happen again. It's how accountability works. It's how forgiveness is supposed to work. I think and it's interchangeable. I think you can't. Both things do need to happen, though. You need to forgive yourself, and you need to forgive the other person. I think people tend to think forgiveness means lack of accountability, which is the complete opposite. Like, if I'm forgiving them, that means they weren't wrong. It's like, no, you can forgive a person and keep them 6 feet away, social distance or not. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can still love a person, forgive them, and completely remove them from your life. You can block them, you can mute them, you can delete their phone number, you can do whatever you want. But the forgiveness it always comes back to us, because that creates more space for us to show up in other ways for ourselves and other people. Forgiveness for me, it has never been about the other person, you know. And sometimes I think we fall into the booby trap where it's like, I just need, like I need clarity, and I need this person to own up to their mistake, and you're not gonna get that sometimes. Sometimes
That's a hard one. That's a hard one.
Like, listen, the amount of, like, you want a person to come grieving, you know, groveling. Sometimes they're not even gonna admit that they were wrong, and like, to forget. This is when the forgiveness is so important, because it's not about them; it is about us. Like, I forgive you for what you did, even if you don't accept it. You know what I'm saying? And you don't even have to tell it to them. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of that is we take for granted affirmations, manifestation, and like what healing looks like. But speaking the healing out loud, even just to ourselves, is therapeutic in that way. But you have to have both. You know, I think even in a situation where you feel like I didn't do anything wrong, you know, it's not about whether you did something right or wrong. It's about who was I in this moment that maybe didn't show up in the ways that I would have wanted to. You know, whether it's like I let someone walk all over me, or, you know what I'm saying, like I didn't challenge or confront them sooner, or even sometimes it's like I forgive myself for meeting this person. You know, like, and recognizing too, and there's layers to that, because what I also want the audience to recognize is I don't believe in you're just attracting bad people into your life. You know, especially for women, especially for Black women, there's this like the healing space. It's easy for the healing space to become you get out, you're gonna get what you put out. And it's like, nah.
It's so interesting you mentioned that, because I have definitely been in spaces where that becomes the conversation, the center of the conversation. Like, what are you putting out there? And I'm like, well, I thought I was fine. So, or whatever, or you're seeing women talk about that. That's really interesting you mentioned that, but continue.
Yeah, no, because niggas is trash. Like a narcissistic person is going to be a narcissist regardless. Narcissist is going to find anyone. Good person, bad person, unhealed person, super healed person. I think I will say like a more healthy and healed heart might see the red flags sooner, but a narcissist isn't coming up to you and being like, hey, I'm a piece of shit. So what's going on? Like, that's not what they're doing. They're slowly creeping into your life and then manipulating you. That's why it's called manipulation. Because they've confused you, they've tricked you. It's not like it's you could be anybody and that happens to you. And so it's not about attracting that kind of bad energy, but it's just bad energy in general. But all that to say again, but then there's a level, I think, of forgiveness, because it's easy to be like, why did I let this person in? How did this happen? I didn't deserve this. And it's like, forgive yourself. It happened. Like, it's be with that, and then how do we move on from there?
What is something that you used to think was so right that it took you time to change? Whether it's, you thought it was like right in your life or in, outside and just the world you lived in, but what was something that has either recently changed or just over some time and you've been like, wow, that wasn't it?
Right and wrong. I think for a very lengthy period of time, and I'm a Capricorn too, so Capricorns are just naturally hard-headed. We're always right. And now when I hear anyone say they're always right, for me, it's just like, I'm probably not going to be a friend. Can't do that. Because it means you're not investigating. You're not asking why at all. You're like, it's not me. I'm not the problem. Like, you sure? Are you sure you're not the problem? Because you could very well be the problem, but you're not asking, so you wouldn't know. But for me, it's like I think there's no, like, things are like the belief that things are black and white or right and wrong. There's so much gray. There's so much, I think, that's neutral, that's dependent on context, that's dependent on the nuance of the situation, that's dependent on the relationships of the persons involved in whatever scenario we're discussing. For me, I'm not trying to prove I'm not trying to prove myself right or disprove somebody else. Like, that's not the goal for me anymore. Because that is very much centered in ego. And I don't necessarily even think that was the goal for me, but it definitely, you get into an argument or you get into a confrontation, whether it be volatile or not, it could just be a peaceful disagreement between two people. Like, I'm not trying to find an answer. I want folks to be at peace with wherever we land.
That's such a good key. Yeah, that's where we land.
Yeah, because we're not going to agree on everything, and that's fine. That's fine. As long as our difference in opinion does not mean the oppression of others. For me, I'm cool with it. And then also not wasting energy on those who clearly, like, when we look at racism, when we look at misogyny, it's like, I see the Talib Kweli shit is a good example of that. There were a lot of sisters, and rightfully so, calling out the trash, right? Like, Talib was on social just acting a fool. And then you saw women who were like, why aren't others in the rap community calling them out? And it's like, because they probably feel the same way. Either they're not paying attention to it, or B, they are aligned with that theory of thinking. And I think when I think about the men in my circle who carry themselves in a very different way, especially when it comes to Black women, the dudes who don't carry themselves that way, we're not having a civil conversation about what it means to show up for Black women in the Black community. Like, they're not hearing that. And I think
there's no place for education, you feel like, or they're just not willing to be accountable to the moment that's being had.
It's absolutely that. Not willing to be accountable, because it goes back to the, like, and they're not thinking I'm always right per se, but they're very entrenched in their ideas and their ideals. Like, there are certain folks, I think, who are very much like Trump supporters, like very much digging their heels into whatever idea they have of a person, a community, a situation, You know, we see the jokes flying around about Megan Thee Stallion. That's not a microcosm. Like, that's not just Twitter. There are dudes who think that way, and who, even if you're engaging with them in a conversation about why that's wrong, are not going to see it because they don't want to. And so for me, that's why it's always been
for them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but do you feel like that's because, like we said, it's attached to their identity, it's attached to their safety, it's attached to their worthiness, to thinking that way?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's that, and I think programming. You know, like there's been a level of programming to like, and not the. I think it really goes back to the asking of why, which is very much connected to what you're just talking about. But folks who are not willing to ask why I think that, you know, or like why am I so entrenched in this belief of what it means to be a Black man, and what it means to be a Black woman. You know, like if you wouldn't have worn that, that wouldn't have happened, or you know what I'm saying, like. There are folks who think, and I mean, there are Black women who feel the same way in with that regard. But you ask yourself why, and it's like a lot of that is you know, that's another conversation about, you know, how certain folks are raised in their church, and so like there's a version of like showing up and being pure that's upheld, and which is really steeped in patriarchy as well. You know what I'm saying? Like the Bible isn't exempt from it, and so I think. It all, but it all comes back down to the idea of like, I just want peace. Because if I want peace, then I'm not looking to belittle you, to disrespect you, to put you in a situation where you look wild. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna honor the space in this engagement, and right or wrong is not the pretense for how I lead or lean into a conversation. That's not what it's about.
Yeah. Well, you kind of already mentioned that the conversation within your circles are very different, but can you give us some insight in that? What are you and the other fellow Black men talking about right now? And I kind of want to hear about those who are not taking accountability so we can figure that out, but also more of the guys who are. What are those conversations like? Are they understanding how, like, for me, I understand how we got here. The exciting part is when are we leaving, right? Like, I get it. And as we have been all sitting inside, hopefully also going inside, we should all be even more aware of how we got here, how we were programmed, conditioned, and how several systems all together, you know, meet to this one thing to make sure Black people, Black and brown people, do not feel like they are who they really, really are.
Yeah.
As we're becoming more, even, not that we haven't been aware, but this is a reckoning, if we're being real. This is a reckoning and awakening. And so what are those conversations like with you and fellow Black men? Are you guys sad, scared, worried? Are you trying to figure out how to be the best? Are you helping educate other people? Are you realizing that you've been a part of the problem? How does that work?
I think it's a great question, Stacey. I think it's all those things. It's like recognizing that I've participated in misogyny. I've you know what I'm saying, like I've manipulated women before in the past. You know what I'm saying? Like I've spoken candidly about this. You know, I was on a podcast with Jeff Johnson recently, and we were talking all things like Black man healing and really dismantling the systems that create a certain kind of thinking that is dangerous for Black women and Black men. And you know, it's really us sitting together and unpacking. You know, like, you know, talking about what I learned from my father, what I didn't learn, you know, what I learned from my community of Black men, what I learned from hip hop music, you know, what I learned from hip hop videos, like the things that, like how misogyny just kind of slowly works its way into our everyday existence. You know, you learn that catcalling is the way that you approach women if you're a child growing up, because that's what you see in the neighborhood, you know, like, we have to do it better, and like we don't do a good enough job as a community, Black men especially, for holding space for more than one idea or feeling or thought. So it's like I can recognize that there's a stereotype about Black men, and there's conversations that are happening on social about Black men who are making things unsafe for Black women, right? Like, I can own up to the fact that, I'm not one of those Black men, right? I can also own up to the fact that there are Black men who are out there protesting, who are making space for women. I can also own up to the fact there are a lot of Black men who are not. And my job is not to argue with a Black woman about that. My job is not to argue about her experience. And so on the other hand of that, I mean, I have mixed views because I think sometimes, and it's something I've been saying recently, like we just have to be, we can't get I don't think we're ever going to get rid of racist or racism per se. I just think, we're always there's always, again, balance. There's always going to be some level of like negative energy that's going to be there in order to counter and also reinforce the positive. Like that's just kind of been the ways of the world before racism, right? Like war has been part of our history. But I do think there's something to be said for being louder than the racist, being louder than the misogynist. And so there are dudes who are just not going to get it, who don't want to get it. Like Drew Dixon, she said something recently where it's just like, maybe we don't even need to worry about them. Like I think that it gets to a certain point when you're putting energy into a person or into people who and recognize who don't get it. And not to say that they're unforgivable or unredeemable, but I don't have time to keep pouring energy into those who don't get it. My job is to continue to create safe spaces for everyone in the community, trans women, queer women, femme, whomever, like the Black folks in the community who are doing the work, who want to feel safe while doing the work. My job is to continue to create those spaces, because that negative shit is not going to go nowhere. We just I would love to limit it, which also means we have to start communicating earlier. And that's also been part of the practice. Like, when I'm talking in middle schools and high schools, it's about, hey, listen, Black girl, like, know your worth, know your value. Black boys, like, recognize, know your worth and know your value. And also recognize that you have, like, we all have to do better jobs of creating safe spaces for each other. This is how we talk to each other. This is how we don't talk to each other. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then also, hey, maybe you could use your art as a vehicle to transmit some of that frustration out onto a page instead of trying to transmit it out into a system. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of folks don't have a vehicle in which to process the things that are making things unsafe for others. And so, like, part of that is also it's also that catching them while they're like 13, 12, 11, you know what I'm saying? Earlier than that even. But because by the time they get to like to my big grown age, if they still talking that talk, it's going to take some wild event in their life in order for them to recognize the fault and blame that they carry for the systems that they are helping to uphold, whether they recognize it or not,
That's something that's also on my mind too, and thank you so much for sharing that. But it just knowing that this starts really young, and this starts, in so many different, in school and church and gatherings and friendships and needing to be cool at 13 and all of those things, they're a buildup. And so when you're doing the reckoning work at 35, 34, 45, whatever, that is like, it's not easy. So we can really be a part of healing and reimagining early. That is, I second that completely, because I'm like, Lord, fine, let me know how to do it. We got to come up with a 5-year fairy tale, a magazine or a way to like get into our youth, at an early age. And you never really realize, even when we were youth, you have people saying like, we got to pour into them. We're like, okay, whatever. I just want to be an adult. Here we are.
Here we are. And like, I think about my eldest little Lila, and like my job is that I want to teach her autonomy over her body and over her feelings. And so it's like, if someone touches you in any way that feels inappropriate, you let daddy know. If someone is saying something that makes you uncomfortable, let me know. You don't have to hug everybody. My relative, like, I come from a West Indian family, like our community, Black community in general, like we just come give me a hug. Like, she don't have to. And when I ask, so and if she does it, I'm not forcing my child to do anything. Because I think what we talk about grooming, but whether we recognize it or not, we start grooming children very early with the behaviors that we condition them to believe in or to become, I don't want to say victims of, but you're creating an environment where a Black boy or a Black girl is now recognizing that they don't have autonomy over themselves. That if someone tells them to do something who's older than them, who's bigger than them, then they have to do it. Or they have to go along with that. And it's like, no, I want my daughter to ask why. or I want her to have the authority and the autonomy to say no. You know, and I think if we start teaching Black boys that sooner, and also teaching Black boys that they don't have ownership, because I've had to do that on my own terms, in my own time. Like, you are groomed to think that you have ownership over female bodies. Like, if you're a nice guy, if you get rejected, you're almost felt to believe that you deserved to have this person, you know, or you deserve to have this companionship with this person that you've chosen. That completely removes a woman from the process of that conversation, right? And so the work for us is really like, again, why, you know, and how do we unpack patriarchy to a point, into a place where everyone feels safe? But a lot of it is the little things, it's all the things we're talking about. Self-value, self-worth, forgiving yourself, being grateful for who you are, and like putting the onus on me as opposed to of the expectation of someone else giving that to me. And so that other person doesn't give it to me, or I feel ashamed by that other person, then I react in violence, right? I react in like misogynoir and like using language that again is unsafe. It all comes back to self in that in those times, I think.
Some of those points we definitely have to come back and do an episode 2 on parenting. But I love all of that. But I was like, and some of that we need, because there's some more to dive into there, because that is truly, again, fostering that relationship with why so early in your kid's life and the young people in your life is really incredible. And so before we wrap, I want to ask you one last question. I actually have to look down because I need it to be perfect. Because it's a little complex, but I know you can handle it. So how do you recognize, reckon, and redeem the complexities within yourself? So how do you recognize, reckon with, and then redeem the complexities within yourself?
I think for me, I get to say yes more enthusiastically. Because I've done the work to really be very discerning about what speaks to me and what doesn't. And a lot of that is because I can recognize I was saying yes to a lot of things just because they were in front of me. You know, you come from a place of lack. You come from an environment where, you know, you're kind of taught to fend for yourself, and there's scarcity everywhere. And so it's like, yes, I'll say yes to this job. Yes, I'll say yes to this gig. Yes, I'll say yes to this relationship. Yes, because look, I had like, they're giving me attention. They're giving me space. And it's like, even if it's unhealthy, even if they're red flags, you're saying yes because it is the first time you felt like fed, you know? And it's taken me a good, 37 years till I get to a place where now I say yes to things that speak to me. And now, surprisingly, the things that come into my orbit generally are things I want to say yes to. I've created, and a lot of that is the work and the reckoning of the things that I had to get to deal with. You know, like therapy put me in a place to be able to do that. Sharing, you know, like I think we underestimate how valuable it is to just share and share without judgment, which is why therapy is so important and so helpful. Like, but sharing with other people who you care about without judging yourself for the sharing. Like, even if the person on the other end of the line might be questioning the behavior or judging it, it's sometimes just the relinquishing of the story, of the narrative, that takes the weight away from it. Because sometimes we get so caught up in our heads, it's easy to mystify the work as opposed to just letting it out. Because once you let it out, then it's not as dramatic, it's not as impactful, it's not as powerful. It doesn't feel like it has as much power over us once we tell the story. But being able to do all those things allowed me to, I think, really reconcile and reckon with the things I had yet to deal with by just creating them, like whether it was creatively, whether it was putting it in song, putting it on stage, having healthy, wonderful conversations with wonderful people about it. But that all put me in a place where, like, I can feel it in my body when I'm excited about something. And so once I feel like that tingle, I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. If I don't feel that tingle, then I don't do it. You know, if I don't feel excited about it, I'm like, no. Because now I put myself in a position where I can say no. Because there's income coming in from all the things that I actually enjoy doing. You know, but it took work. It also took me, this kind of goes back to the shame and guilt. So I'm actually glad you asked me that, because it did also take me saying yes to things that I don't think I'm ashamed about per se, but it took me saying yes to things that maybe weren't the best for me. Like, you have to go through those things, unfortunately. Like, there is no shortcut to that, because then that creates a person who, hopefully, right, if you have systems in place that allow you to like sit and sift through those things, it allows you to reconcile and reckon with those things in a way that's healthy, so that you can say, oh man, here's what I could have done differently. Not right or wrong, but differently. And I think that's also, like, the language is important. Like, not right or wrong, but how could I have done this differently to get a different outcome? And then also, how can I detach myself from an outcome? That's a whole nother conversation, right? Like, so that I'm more focused on the process of growing and being than I am of like, I want to get the shiny car or the shiny house or the New York Times bestseller or whatever the case might be. Those are all the outcomes, but the in-between stuff, that's where the gold is. And so focusing on that while also recognizing that I had to go through some of those troubling things and say yes to those things in order to be better at discerning what I deserve to say yes to. But it's a process to get there. We just have to honor that, you know?
It's a process. That's the perfect way to end it. It's a process, because there was no perfect answer you could give. You didn't say, I jumped here and then I did this and I did 2 flips and it's perfect. No, it's really recognizing the journey and the process of our humanity, of the pitfalls, the hardships, the wonderful moments, the lessons, and how they turn into you truly knowing, yes, this path makes sense, but you had to kind of wiggle around and make sure, and that's just the truth.
Yeah. People try to tell you, I would have did, like, do this, do that, and I'm very much like, I need to throw shit to the wall. And I advise all people to do that. You know, you can take advice. I think advice is important, especially from trusted sources who have lived through experiences and like have an understanding. But there was shit that I just had to learn on my own. I wouldn't have learned from someone just telling me. I had to do it. You know, Lauryn Hill in the Unplugged CD, she talks about feeling like she's a mad scientist. And so like she has to like, so she's doing the experiments on herself. And I think that's how I feel. It's all, I would encourage all of us to be scientists in that way. To like experiment, like do the work, live your life. You know, like you're probably going to hurt people, unfortunately. Like this mystical idea that love is not hurt is bullshit. Like people you love, you're going to fall in love with a person or love a person, a family member, and hurt them in some way. Doesn't mean it's going to be grand. It doesn't mean it's going to be life shattering, but they're going to hurt. Like that hurt is a part of the human dynamic, you know, but Buddhism will teach us, like, you know, pain is optional. Suffering is a choice. And suffering is the clinging to the things that ail us, that hurt us, you know, but love is all encompassing. So it all encompassing means everything, the hurt, the good, the joy, the pain, all that stuff. The more we can reconcile and be okay with that, the easier I think the process of this living also becomes, you know, which we have to live it. You have to live it. You can't wait for someone to like teach you how.
With that said, I'm processing and I'm talking. Keep living it. It's all good. Everybody keep going. I just love it. I just want to thank you so much for being a guest. I really appreciate you. I already told you, I was like, you got to come on. You got to share your knowledge with us. This is just, these conversations, they're so healing. They're so necessary. And I love your perspective. So thank you so much for sharing. This means a lot.
Sis, likewise. Thank you for having me. I'm always here. You know what I'm saying?
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Human to Human. Stay tuned for next week. It's going to be just as amazing as this. Share this with all your friends and